Welcome to the Intimacy Lab. I'm Renee, an intimacy guide, surrogate partner, and professional cuddler. We're here to talk about intimacy in a much broader view than what you probably think. Most people think about intimacy as sex. We're going to break that apart here. Welcome to the lab. Welcome back to the Intimacy Lab. I'm Renee, and today I get to be joined by another local. This season, I'm trying to work on bringing in more Southern California people. So today we have Angela Rivero, who is just north of me, like my north neighbor by just a couple exits. So Angela, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm Angela Rivero. I live in Escondido, and so my office is also in Escondido. So we're definitely close to each other, which is really cool. And I'm a somatic practitioner, so I do things based in the body, not just how we talk about things, but actually understanding our signals of the body. And I also am a sex, love, and relationship coach. So I love to specialize in female intimacy, like female anatomy, because most of us don't have that education growing up. And so I just like to reconnect people to what they haven't found out through their life, you know what I mean? And that really just puts pieces together. I've also been married for a long time to my husband, Jesse, and we have two boys, one 13 and one will be 11 on Sunday.
Well, it's good to reconnect with you. We got lunch, was it last year? Early maybe last year? It feels like it was a while ago.
I mean, probably at least 6 months ago. I don't know.
It was definitely 6 months flies by so fast. It was definitely longer than that. Well, it's one of those things I'm like, how did we meet? And we were kind of trying to piece it together. We think that I posted something about my happy hour or something like that in a local San Diego group. And we got connected and grabbed lunch and really appreciate your work. And it's good to have you here just so that the community, because I like to think that this is kind of Michelle's personal little bubble podcast where I just talk to people I like. My listeners probably are people that I know. Maybe it goes out farther than that, but I think of it as maybe a ripple, like a pebble. I drop the pebble and who knows where it goes, but I'm mainly here because I just enjoy talking to my friends and giving people a little peek inside those conversations. So would you do somatic experiencing, correct?
I do, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit of how would you describe it? Because people ask me and they think because I do somatic work that they conflate things. And I'm like, nope, I'm not somatic experiencing and I've not been trained in it. And I haven't even taken an intro class or anything to be able to really say that I know what I do. What do you do in that space?
Yeah, I mean, the creator, Peter Levine, he started studying animals, I believe, and he saw, why don't animals in the wild get traumatized? Like they get chased by animals and things like that happen to them. And then they have these certain patterns that they do, and then they get back up, obviously if they aren't fully attacked and killed. But and so he just was really curious about it. Why do humans, because we can override our signals in ourselves, and animals don't really do that. They follow a natural pattern. So an animal might freeze, and then all of a sudden, once they're not in threat, they'll come out of freeze and they'll go back to their lives. And so you'll often see an animal shake after something really traumatic has happened. And we humans shake as well, but a lot of times we can also suppress it. And also sometimes even the medical field, they'll give you medicine to suppress the shaking. So you're in a car accident or something. And so you're stopping the natural completion of something that was really stressful, that happened too fast, too quickly. And so a lot of people think, trauma is only these big events that happen, like assaults and all that. And it can be so much more than that, like complex trauma, where we didn't really have our needs met growing up, even though we had nice parents and all that stuff. And so it's called complex because it's not like you really even know something was off, but you grew up in a way that felt I don't know, a little bit weird, you didn't get all your needs met. So what he did is he created a modality that follows the patterns in the system, whether it's like I said, that completion of something that was really stressful, for example. And so it's like a body-based modality, meaning we're going to learn the signals of the body, what it's telling you, and also complete patterns that were stuck in the system because of overwhelmed. And so everybody doesn't get traumatized just because they've had a stressful situation, but it's really also how much we're alone and not supported after something big happens. That's usually when they're lingering a pattern in your nervous system that isn't completed. And so he talks about it's really coming back to the essence of who we are, because most of us can deal with the triggers and the traumas. We're used to it. It's not comfortable, but we're used to it. But not everybody has the capacity to feel joy, pleasure, or good things. And so it's just exploring different patterns in the nervous system that more likely has been stuck. And that could be even like someone who saw something really terrible and they had like the startled fright that happens and they kind of walk around like maybe for years like that because it never got completed. And so it's like helping piece back together kind of a fragmentation that happens in the system. So it's really just putting pieces back together and also giving yourself a lot of resources and understanding that you didn't have before. So I don't know if that explains it, but that's at least part of
That's that's so I just asked another friend to help me understand it, and you said almost not clearly word for word, but my system is going, "Yep, yep, that's how you understood it before. Okay, I think I have it." So I'm so glad that you were able to explain that, and hopefully that'll help me when I'm making referrals and suggestions.
Yeah.
Maybe you should try. I say it often. Maybe you should try somatic experiencing, and I always feel a little weird when the follow-up question is, "Oh, can you explain it to me?" And I'm like, "I don't really know. I just know that it's well respected.
Hmm.
Um, it's got, great people. The people that I know that are trained in somatic experiencing are top quality practitioners. And so it's just it's not the work I do,
Hmm.
right? I'm much more on the relational, like deep relational, not I know your work is relational also, at least that's what it's been pointed out to me. And I'm like, it's very different. I'm showing up in a very different relational way. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So I was thinking that for our group of cards today, that we would play the healing edition, which is a little
Mm.
micro edition that I carry with me often because when I'm at conference, sometimes we want something to do. And so I'll pull this out and we'll talk about what comes up for us. So let's see where we start. I'm not pre-sorting these. So the first question is, what do you understand now about the healing process that you didn't before?
Yeah. I was just talking to you about this before we started recording. I think that what's become really clear over the last few years is that it's really not even about healing, or at least not this giant pursuit that people are in this pattern of like trying to heal so hard and work so hard to heal. And they do all the things and they still feel stuck. So for me, it's really about a reconnection to self and to the things that we didn't have and building resources, which I think then healing is a natural side effect of that reconnection. Um, but what I see a lot with my clients is that, like I said, working so hard and doing all the right things, all the books, all the things, right? And it's like go big or go home and like fight really hard. And so that's kind of just continuing maybe the survival energy, there's stress in the system. And that almost like then healing feels like a threat or like
Mm,
it's too much and it's overloading your system. And then you feel hopeless or broken because you're like, I've tried everything. So for me, it's not really about healing. I think it's just really about connection with ourselves and honoring the pace of our actual nervous system, not what we think we should be doing or how we
mhm.
want to be. Because we all have those internal resources. We just haven't truly been taught them intellectually, and then definitely not in the system of our own bodies, where we're like, well, I can think that I'm feeling safe, but if I don't actually feel it, then
Right.
then it doesn't matter how many books or anything else you've read. And that's why it's different somatic experiencing, because it's not just about like, oh, I understand it. No, you got to understand it in your actual body, right?
Right. That you can't intellectualize your way. I think for me, the answer is like that the healing is there is no end point. Like, oh, I passed the test. I got the A or I checked the box and now I shouldn't have any of these things come up for me anymore. Right. It's like, it's more like being able to recognize what's happening and why it's happening and being able to make maybe a different choice around how you're responding to it. Like just with the knowledge that like for myself, I'll be like, "Oh, this is reminding me of something from my past, and that's why I'm having this reaction. It's not really about what's happening in front of me."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And just that awareness slows everything down to where it's not so a panic space. It's like, "Oh, this is that thing." Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's like building a flexible nervous system that has
Mhm.
resources and tools that it's never had before. And so, like you said, like we're meant to have activation on our nervous system to want to fight or flee if we actually need to, but sometimes we get stuck in those states because of things that have happened. But we're never not going to have triggers or things come up in the rest of our lives. But if you feel a resource and you have tools to be able to have that pause and support your system instead of being completely and overwhelmed, you might be like stressed as opposed to that extreme, you know? So it's really building that more than anything else.
I love to talk to my husband in the car, like when we do road trips, like I'm like, "Ooh, this is our time to talk about deep stuff and
Yeah.
whatnot." And um we were talking about trauma and how there was a study that was a certain type of journaling could help you basically reprocess the trauma. So it showed
Mm.
a effect on your not nervous system, on your immune system that you
Mm.
could, which totally makes sense to me. It's not magic. It's just like, okay, so you're going to process the story. You basically write for up to 30 minutes about the same event four times, either four times like 4 days in a row or once a week for 4 weeks. And they've shown a improvement in your immune system. So I'm like, hey, Paul, they suggest like list like three traumatic experiences from your past and maybe don't start with the most traumatic. Start trying this with like number two or number three, right? I said, what's on your list? And he just goes, I don't really have anything. And I
Mm.
was like, in my head, I was so judgmental about, what are you, like a psychopath? How do you not have anything that comes up for you? Right. And then my colleague Brian Gibney was saying, as I was like telling him the story on the rest of my car ride, he just goes, Michelle, have you ever thought that maybe he doesn't process trauma the way that you do? And I was like, oh. And then I remember watching a video with Gabor Mate talking about like which um people in the armed forces, like which ones will have CP or will have PTSD and which ones won't. And a lot of times it has to do with what their childhood was like. And I'm like, oh yeah, he doesn't have an ACEs score, an adverse childhood experiences score. Like,
Yeah.
what is that like? Right. And so I think of myself in relationship and that natural sense to like compare ourselves and be like, how come this is so hard on me? And I'm like, oh, I had a very different childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really makes a difference. I think that comes back to that complex trauma too, where
Mhm.
we don't know what we don't know and we operate a certain way and that's how we relate to other people. And even if we want to feel better, if we're on that old operating system, because, people update their phones all the time,
Yep.
right? But then we never think about maybe updating like how we're operating it's our own nervous system and all that stuff. So like,
I'm on Michelle 5.4, something like that. Like, I've made this joke for so many years, Angela. I
yeah.
started back in like 10 years ago, I started a blog called Sex After Marriage. It was
Mhm.
right after my first marriage ended.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a public diary of like exploring kink and BDSM and then polyamory and I kept it going
Mhm.
pretty consistently for a couple of years. And so I would regularly say, "Oh, there was another operating system upgrade," right?
Yeah.
Like I refer to like the first, almost 40 years was like Michelle 1.0. And
Mm,
then I would say like the changes came so rapidly after that divorce that I was constantly like, if you thought you knew me last week, I'm
mm,
a whole different person. Like
yeah.
as soon as I found Betty Dodson and started doing all the work on my own sexuality and pleasure and body image. And like everything moved at such a rapid pace, I couldn't even keep up with myself.
Interesting,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, I don't even know what number of system I'm on now, but it's not 1.0 anymore. I do know that. That is for sure.
For sure, and I think that that's what I like about this work so much too, is that people come in and, like I said, they've tried so many things and they still kinda feel, like, a bit hopeless or stuck, but
Hmm.
it's like, you really do update your system if you start to learn things that you've never learned before, and then you start to feel the actual shifts, not just think it, but you feel the shifts, and I think that's why a lot of hope is restored doing type of somatic modalities for that particular reason, so I think that's why it's such a wonderful modality, all the ones that we're doing, so.
We don't learn any of these things in school, right? Like whether we're worried about us learning who was the 36th president or things that you're never going to use or like, we're never going to have a computer in our pocket. You have to memorize these things, at least,
Mhm.
when I was in school. And now that's not the case. And wouldn't it be interesting if we did more emotional education, relationship education, these things that like, I wonder if they're teaching about polyvagal theory and the nervous system and these things.
Yeah,
Wouldn't that be interesting? Like I think about as I grew up in West Michigan
yeah.
and back there, it was very common to like get out of high school and get married and start having kids pretty
Uh-huh.
quickly. I did not know how to regulate myself at that time, and the difference between, like, my first child and my second child, which were 8 years apart, and I was vastly more mature for the second one, those would be really interesting things to know coming out of high school about, our ability to have regulated children really depend on our own ability to regulate.
It is, yeah.
I didn't consider that I was training my child's nervous system.
I mean, why would we? We'd never hear about something like that. But I definitely truly believe if we started learning this stuff, even like kindergarten, ways to just like reconnect and do somatic practices and things, I mean, we would change generations.
I The good news is I do think there's a shift. Just from my limited perspective, I
Hmm.
know, some early childhood educators that definitely are bringing more emotional intelligence,
Yeah,
work into the classroom and helping, even just naming your feelings, right? And learning, what to do with those feelings because they're all good. They all give us great information. Just
right.
utilizing them responsibly.
Yeah, and I've really noticed that people don't always have the permission or the ability to sit with their emotions. There's a lot of discomfort and fear that comes up. And with me, it's not the idea of trying to push them away. It's like, how do you sit with them with the right resources and support so they aren't feeling like a survival thing or like an overwhelming experience? And so, um, yeah, it's more than just like being able to name it, but it's like there's a that deepness that happens when you are able to
Mhm,
sit with like anger when you were never allowed to be angry or nobody modeled
mhm,
anything for you. And so, as much as it's somatic, as far as you like learn to listen to the signals of your body, it's also like how can we in a really good pace feel things that we don't want to feel so that you know that it's safe to feel them so they don't run your life
mhm.
unconsciously anymore. So,
Or feel them faster. I was in reading a book over COVID. I can't remember the name of it, but it was talking about, we wait till a feeling is at like a
mm,
80%,
yeah,
right? And if we could catch that feeling at a much lower level, we could do something with that information
yeah,
rather than waiting until we, flip our lid,
yeah.
pop our top, as they say.
Yeah, and that comes with like attunement and practice, right? To realize,
Mhm,
oh, this actually is anger, or actually underneath this is actually real deep sadness or grief and all that kind of
mhm,
stuff. And so naming it is definitely a really big part of it. And then how it kind of signals in your body, whether it's like
mhm.
complete tightness in your chest or something else.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference in how you can tolerate it. And then
Mhm.
it's not terrifying anymore, not at least not a lot anymore. It's like a big thing that shifts for people. And so, yeah, emotions are a big deal for our work, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember watching a video years ago with, somebody in my world talking about the power of tears. And
Mm,
I remember I was at a point in my life that I still had a lot of shame about crying, and I was in a grieving process where I was crying a lot and I kept apologizing for it, and I had a lot of feelings of being too much and whatnot. And I remember listening to him talk about how it's not the people that cry that he worries about, it's the people that don't.
mhm.
And I was like, there was just something in that phrase that kind of flipped for me. It's like, oh, you mean I'm lucky that I'm able to release all of this? How
Yeah.
great. And then, I love the book, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving
Mhm,
from Pete Walker. I don't know if you've
mhm.
read that. But there is a very large section on like the power of tears. And it's just another place to get permission to like clean it all out. Orgasms for the eyes,
I love
whatever it
that.
is.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know. It's true. Like I said, even that thing that I was talking about, like how animals shake afterwards, like
Mhm.
I think even knowing that like it could be a way your nervous system's trying to reset after really something stressful, that could be like empowering to know that it's a natural response in the body and it's doing something to help you reset as opposed to be like,
Yeah.
oh, you're just so scared and blah blah blah. And like you kind of feel bad about like, why am I so shaky after this? No, your body's trying to reset and it's doing you a solid by letting your body actually do it and usually when we can just allow it, it's usually just a matter of a moments or a few minutes that things start to come back online and all that stuff. So, like I said, the more we understand how our systems work, the more we can have grace and empathy for ourselves and not feel so hard
Yeah.
on ourselves.
I remember, having a client years ago that taught he was the first client that really came in with a desire to work on trauma,
Mhm.
and not necessarily with me, but he had a trauma background. He was seeing a trauma therapist. He was coming in for, he just wanted to eye gaze. It was something that him and his therapist were practicing after EMDR sessions, and he wanted more practice space. But what ended up happening in our space was that he did have some trauma release. And I asked him, he was a little shaky, and I said, "Is that anxiety?" And he goes, "Oh, Michelle, remember in Peter Levine's Waking the Tiger?"
Yeah,
And I'm like, "Oh,"
exactly.
and I had read it, but I'd never experienced it in person to put it together. And then fast forward, occasionally I'll have a client that experiences that in session with me. And just to be able to just let them know it's natural. It's not going to last forever, but it's actually really good for you. Just let it
Mhm.
run its course.
Yeah, there's a deactivation that's happening in the system potentially,
Mhm.
or like all of a sudden they have space because they've felt seen or understood, and something starts
Mhm.
to shift in the body that's maybe been stuck in that loop or pattern for so long. And so people sometimes burp or yawn or things happen after because, the digestion is the last thing that's online when you're in a
Mhm.
survival state, because it's not necessary to digest when you need to fight or flee or whatever, and so things will all of a sudden kinda soften, you'll have more breath, and then it might be like a twitch or something that happens, and, yeah, they're just ways that your nervous system's like, "Oh, I felt this now, and I can start to, like,
And
reorganize my system," you
yeah,
know?
and sometimes it's a trembling,
Mhm.
right? And I the polar bear video that's, on YouTube of
Yeah,
watching the polar bear shake, it's a little disturbing to watch, but it did help me understand the process a little bit better.
yeah. Yeah, it's
Cool.
good
You
stuff.
ready for another question?
Sure.
All right. What title would you give this chapter of your healing journey?
Nice question.
I have to think about that.
Gosh, I'm trying to think of the right word. Like I have the feeling to some degree. I'm just trying to feel it, but what's the right word with that? I don't know. I guess the word settled or settling
Mm,
comes in. I just feel like I'm really connected to my work and understanding so much about why this all matters and how it matters. And that just feels very aligned and settling in my own system, um, in a really lovely way. And I think that, for my child and other things, I felt a lot of unsettling in my system for many, many years. Unconsciously, I had no clue that I felt that way. Um, and so for the last several years, I've just really noticed really settled in and feeling like a more balanced calmness in my system. Um, and that feels really beautiful to be able to share with my clients and my people, my connections and things. Yeah. So just settled and aligned.
yeah. The word that first came up for me was grief.
Oh,
And it's like, I don't know what the title would be. Something about the old way, the Michelle 1.0 wasn't who I really was, right? It's interesting to get to know myself from a different place because I'm not unknowingly making adjustments to make my space safer or like how I show up in the world. A phrase that I've recently learned was like compulsory sexuality,
oh,
right? How much sex did I have because it was expected or
right.
that's my role or what have you? And so in that there is a lot of grief about what has changed because some things are easier now, but some things are different and maybe might feel harder in some ways.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's a lot of change that happens. And in change, I think grief just has to come along with it. I don't want to stay there, but I want to give myself the opportunity to just like let those feelings out once in a while. I did a session Sunday for myself of just getting to really tap in to the grief of like some things aren't as easy. Sex isn't as easy anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of it is my age and perimenopause and medications and also like, the reasons we have sex change over the years. And, there's just so much in the history that I just go, there's a lot of grief here. And I say it with a smile.
Hmm.
Like, I'm also excited to see what's on the other side of it. But it is definitely an interesting change.
Oh,
When I was younger, I want to out myself. When I was younger and I'd hear about women being like kind of oversex, and I had, Betty Dotson in my life at that time, and she was such a not oversexed person. Like definitely not oversexed. Um and I thought, yeah, you just gotta keep it in the forefront of your mind and if it's important to you, that won't change. And now I'm in the reality of it of like, oh, it's really difficult to keep it in the forefront and to
Mhm.
prioritize it and, you know, decide what value it has in my life. So now I want to apologize to any woman that I had judgment for back in the
Mm.
day, that it's the change is real. The change is real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing about your grief. I think that's definitely one of the elements that we all experience when we do trauma work or any work really is that there's phases of grief. And you also name like you gotta let it be with it, sit with it, and then eventually,
Mhm.
something else will shift out of that. But like it's an important part to allow ourselves to grieve, you know?
Yeah, like, again, I said I don't wanna sit in it too long. I
Mhm.
remember doing a thing with a friend a couple summers ago where we wrote something that we wanted to let go of and threw
Yeah.
it in the fire, right? And at that it was another phase of grief of, like, letting go of something that had changed and I didn't wanna sit and think about, "I wonder if I can go back to that or get that back." It's
Mhm.
like if we're living in that space, then we're not in the presence, right? And I already struggle with living in the future so much. I definitely don't wanna struggle with living in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're definitely also beings that are in cycles, right? And so,
Mhm.
especially with sexuality and anything really, especially women, we have these different cycles or people who identify it with female body, whatever. It's like we have cycles that we go through, and
Mhm.
sometimes sex is something that we're really into and sometimes it's not, and I think the less we judge ourselves and also be curious, and how we view sexuality is also really important because, if it's for someone else all the time, then it can be really depleting. And a lot of us have that growing up where we're supposed to provide and give, and it doesn't really matter what we feel or what we want, and so that's why we're always kind of feeling unmet. So it's important to have that curiosity too, but if once you have it, I think there's also times to let ourselves not be curious as much.
Yeah, I think, I will speak for myself back in the day when I was doing a lot of sex out of obligation,
Yeah.
was like, it's for the betterment of the relationship or what
Mhm.
have you, but ultimately, in the long run, it really takes a toll. It takes
Mhm.
a toll on your own libido and, like, it seeps into things, so I'm always a big proponent now of, like, these are worthy conversations and worthy, like, space to experiment. My partner and I did a 1-month experiment where all sex was off the table unless I asked for something,
Mm.
and it had to be a real desire for it. I couldn't should myself.
Mhm.
Right? And it didn't even have to be sex that I asked for. It could be I wanted pizza for dinner or I wanted him to
Mhm.
watch a movie with me. And what the on the other side of this, and this was his idea. I want to give all the props in the world to my husband. In the end, there was twice that month that I asked for sex. And there were lots and lots and lots of evenings, me going to bed thinking I should be asking for sex, and me telling myself that is not what this experiment is,
Yeah.
right? Is this to really figure out where is your desire sitting? And it was a really good thing to just go through and know that my husband was totally on board with it because it was his idea.
Oh, it's lovely.
And just like noticing how much the internal pressure shows up even without the external pressure.
Yeah, it's pretty huge, but I also think you pointed out something really important. It's like the I don't know, the ritual of practicing asking for what we want, not just in the
Mhm.
bedroom, but so many other ways. And I find that it's not easy to know your desire, especially if you've been in like kind of survival energy and feeling kind of
Mhm.
overwhelmed and exhausted. So starting to be like, oh, I'm gonna have the perfect sex life can feel really like out of reach or not possible. And so it's definitely one of the things that I help people do is connect to their desires, and that just be the smallest thing ever. Where it's like maybe I just want a piece of dark chocolate today, and I can ask for it, or because it's hard to ask for what we want if we're used to not asking or even knowing what we want. So it can be a huge reclamation just to be able to like where how else can I approach this that isn't so direct like this huge topic that I'm not maybe not
Yeah.
fully ready to, but I can like start to truly understand what I want a little bit more and more and ask for what I want. And that alone can also shift things for our intimacy for sure.
Yeah, you don't jump into the deep end and be like, suddenly you're gonna craft your ideal sexual experience
Right.
or anything like that. We joke on my side of the training world is like, do you even know what you need right now? Are you willing to give yourself a bathroom break if you think you have to pee? Like,
I know.
there are so many of us that ignore even that.
Yep.
So we have to start really at the very basics and then work our way up.
Well, yeah, because even like I was mentioning Peter Levine's work, it's like Um, we override our signals, like I said. Even if we have to pee really
Mhm,
bad, we can override it, or if we're really hungry, we can push it back like hours and hours and not take care of ourselves. And so, not everybody has the connection to feeling their sensations in their body, but
mhm,
people usually can be like, "Oh, I do feel like my bladder's a little bit full." You know what I mean? So that's one way even to access like, "Oh, well, that's
mhm,
what body signals are." Is, "Oh, I'm really paying attention. I am feeling maybe a slight hunger in my belly." And so sometimes we don't even feel it because we're so disconnected from it. But like
mhm.
that's the way to also practice. Like I don't need to override this time. Or maybe
Yeah,
I override it, but I'm gonna do it a little bit slower and, like, honor a little bit more pace, than before, so
or just knowing that about yourself, that
Mhm.
it's harder to tap into that. Another husband story. He's going through a new to him issue with migraines.
Mm,
And he does have a hard time noticing what's happening in his body. And so he literally the other day said, "Just a minute, I think I'm having a migraine. Let me go check." And he went and he laid down in the bedroom with the lights off and just did some inventory of his body.
yeah.
Right. And he came back out after just a couple moments and he said, "Yep, I'm having a migraine." But he knows for himself now that he's
Mhm.
not picking up on those cues. And
Right.
so he has to go do what it takes for him to check in with himself and see. So like,
Mm.
I'm like, "Yes, you're figuring out what you need." Like, that's really great.
It's really great. Yeah, and that's, like, it's a perfect example of, like, you don't have to have, like, every answer, every signal in your body,
Mhm,
but start to notice the things like, "Oh, I do have tend to feel sick this way," or whatever it is, and then at least you can slowly catch it or, like, support your system in a way that it hadn't before. I think sometimes
mhm,
people wanna have everything figured out, and that's just not realistic, and they wanna be healed and all these things, but, like, the more we can just connect and learn resources and tools, like I said, it can be really life-changing in how we can support it, and it's like repairing relationship with ourselves because maybe we didn't have a lot of
mhm.
repair growing up, and all of a sudden they'd be like, "Well, I can choose something different this time." Like, whoa, it might be the smallest thing ever, but it leads to a lot of that self agency when we're like, "I'm noticing something different here." Yeah.
I have those. I'm noticing that I'm, like, making my own needs invisible. Why am I hesitant to ask for that? What is that about, right? And just, like,
Mhm.
slowing everything down and getting curious about ourselves.
Yeah.
Alright, do you have another one in you, do you think?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. When was the last time you didn't ask for help, but really needed it? I have to think about that too.
Yeah. I mean, I can always notice that as a pattern that me wants to do things on my own. Totally like a sufficient child thing growing up, and I am very efficient and organized, and so I can make shit happen. And then I can still notice that it's okay to get help and all that stuff. I mean, I had surgery, like I said, a couple weeks ago, and still felt a little bit hard for me to ask one of my friends who lives actually near my house, and my kids go to the same school. It felt hard for me to ask her, "Can you please bring the boys home?" Uh,
Mm.
and she totally could do it, and I actually did ask, so I didn't not ask, but I just wanna say that still, like, it still felt this moment of, like, it feels like a big ask to do this, but I still did it, but, yeah, those patterns come up where I'm like, "How can I make this happen without help?" You
But
know?
I also, like, I imagine you have to high five yourself
Yeah.
when you notice that you did take care of yourself by asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, with Paul having all these migraine things, I had a few friends that were like, "How is your self-care? And
Mhm.
make sure you're asking for help." And I had this moment where I was like, "I'm actually doing really well." I've got the dog sitter taking my dog off my hands even when I don't have client work, which is kind
Mhm.
of feels like a luxury to
Yeah.
say, I joke it's like having a toddler, and I'm like, "Grandma Sue, take the toddler needs to go." And so, like, I feel like I've gotten so much better at
Mhm.
this, but I also have an ego, and once in a while, I'm like, "No, I've got it. I can do everything. I can carry these 12 bags of groceries into the house by myself.
Uh,
I don't need any help."
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I said, it's like those moments where we can notice there's the resistance, the old resistance that come up, and
Mhm.
then even feeling those things because you have the awareness, then you can still ask even if it's uncomfortable, as opposed to not asking at all, or you know what I mean, or if we didn't ask, have the grace to be like, "Oh, I saw I could have used the help there, and I saw that little guy coming back up and not letting me really ask because there was fear or something happening, fear of abandonment or rejection or whatever it is." And so, like, it's always a process.
Yeah, what a good gift to give to yourself, though, the gift of the ask.
Yeah, feels good.
Like, that's really good. All right, I feel like we have to get one spicy question in before the end.
Let's do it.
I feel like you work in sexuality. We need a
Yeah.
spicy question. Let me pull out the triple X box. Now, I wanna say this. I didn't say it, on the last one, but it would still stand. You can always say no to one of these questions. I will filter these out when I look at them and be like, "Nah,
Yeah.
I don't wanna talk about that
Sounds good.
on this space." Okay. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Is it a red flag if a sexual partner is still in touch with an ex? Why or why not?
I mean, it's a little hard to answer because I'm in a monogamous relationship for a long time. I would say when I was younger, that probably would have been like a trigger of insecurity for me. I don't know. I think there can also just be an excitement and a turn on with the fact that we're human and have sexuality. It isn't just like only one little thing that we're supposed to have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it just depends what your own boundaries are with your own relationship with your partner and what kind of level of trust there is, and then it could be playful
Yeah.
and fun and okay, but I think it just
Yeah,
depends on the person.
I don't think I could paint it as, like, a sweeping red flag,
Yeah, yeah,
right? There's too many nuances, like, yeah, if you're non-monogamous, that's really common
yeah.
to be in contact with previous sexual partners or maybe their
Mhm.
current sexual partners or who knows what. But
Exactly.
also, like, I have a pretty well, I think it's had better times. I have a pretty good relationship with my ex-husband.
Mhm.
Right? That's not I think that's a green flag if I
Right.
was in the dating world, right? So
Agree.
it's really interesting.
Yep,
Yeah. It's a it's a it's a it's a flag like every other flag.
yep.
Depends on the context. Right.
So, what do I hate to ask for but love to receive? That's the question, right?
Mhm.
I guess it is that thing where, like, feeling like people just wanna spend time and energy on me. I don't wanna ask for it. But it feels really lovely when, like, people show up and show you, like, really remind you that they care about you. Because that happened even before my surgery. I got, like, a little care package and got phone calls and texts and just really sweet things from my partner, but also friendships and all that stuff. It's not that I would necessarily go out and ask for it, which I could, but it felt really, really lovely to get kinda spoiled or, like, cared for or thought about.
Yeah. I would say I hate asking for gifts,
Mm,
but I love to receive them. Like, I don't it's in I used to do, like, the 5 love language stuff with a lot of my clients years ago. I don't
yeah,
bring it up anymore so much, but I remember people had a lot of, like, internal judgment about being a gifts like
right.
a receiving gifts person.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like I'm like all the love languages, and I would say there's way more than 5, but, like, I joke that I speak them all fluently and I need to receive them all, like, not consistently, but I get so excited for a gift.
Mm,
Yet I'm terrible about giving gifts.
hmm.
So, I don't like to ask for a gift, but man, do I love a gift, especially if it's, like, thoughtful,
Mhm. Yeah.
which is means it's probably not because it's a birthday or Christmas. It's just like a random gift. That would be the thing.
Yeah, I went to, like, a crystal store with a group of friends in Big Bear a couple months ago, and I saw these cute little bells that you can, like, ding at the end of a meditation or something. I'm not gonna buy them here, I'll buy them somewhere else, right, closer to home. And then one of my friends, right before my surgery, has sent me a little package, including those little bells, and so, like,
Uh,
that's why it felt so touching because it's like, she remembered, made an effort to buy them and send them to me, like, it felt like a pretty big deal, and so, having those kind of friendships and that kind of receiving feels really special.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember, um, my ex-mother-in-law cleaned my oven without asking, like, without me asking, like, I was we were moving into a new place, and, she was staying and watching the kids while we were moving stuff, and one time when we came back with a load of stuff, she was cleaning my oven, and I just started crying because
Mhm.
it's, like, one of the least favorite things I ever wanna do, and she just did it without asking, and back then, I was not used to such thoughtfulness,
Right.
and it hit me like a Mack truck, and I was just like, sheet of
Mhm.
tears. So much
Mm.
gratitude.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna throw one more in the mix here. we're up to the triple X. They go up in like thing,
Mhm.
even though we haven't played them super uh too spicy. Oh, that was the one I did last time. I'll pass on that one. Um, I think this is meant to be played in groups, so some of
Mhm.
these like don't make sense. Um, and this is just not helpful. Ugh. What's one subtle thing you do when you really like someone? And this also doesn't have to be sexual.
Mm,
Like just even if you meet like a new friend.
subtle. I'm like, am I a subtle person? I mean, think I'm a pretty straightforward person. But I mean, I'll ask questions about them. I actually have genuine curiosity about them. And I don't know if that's not subtle, but I don't really consider myself a super subtle person. I like to
Okay,
do
we
things
can
very,
take those words. We can take the word subtle out of it. What is something that you do when
okay.
you really like someone?
Uh, yeah, ask them questions. Actually genuinely get to know what they're happy about or passionate about or like what's their thing instead of just being like, "What's your job?" Like, I get genuine curiosity about them, and I also will tell them I really appreciate meeting them and that, about the connection and all that stuff and what it means to me kinda thing. So I'm pretty, like, straightforward with that, with
Yeah,
telling people things that I actually mean and being genuine about it.
like forthcoming.
Yeah. So
There's no
people don't have to guess.
secret.
I think people wanna be met and seen and understood, and we don't always have that in our lives, and so I just make it a point to show genuine interest if there's genuine interest and with kindness and, with care.
Yeah, I hear some appreciation in there too, like verbally appreciating people.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Um, I didn't
I
know there
know.
was a name for this,
Mhm.
but I tend to like to give little gifts, even though I just said I'm not much of a great gift giver. I think maybe what I mean by that is like big gifts.
Mhm.
Um, I like when I've moved across the country a couple of times, and with clients, I'll give them like a little trinket or something. And
Mm.
evidently, that's kind of like a form of pebbling. Like penguins will give each other rocks,
Oh, that's cute.
and it's supposedly like a neurodivergent trait. And so I have this thing about I keep these little like quartz hearts in a
Oh,
little baggie with me, and sometimes I'll leave them with people just as like, I want you to put this in your pocket.
that's sweet.
Like, so that's a little thing that I think that I do that I don't know if it's subtle or not.
Yeah, well, kind of, but it's precious and simple and that extra thought of connection. Because like, a lot of times we orient to, like, triggers and things because it keeps us safe, but,
Mhm.
like, I also teach people how to, like, recognize the glimmers, which is, like, the opposite of
Mhm.
triggers. Have you heard of WNS thing? It's because
Yep.
it's like, like I said, we know how to feel the pain and all that stuff in a lot of ways, right? But like, it's reteaching our nervous system to also feel connection and kindness. So it's like, oh, someone opens the door, like, wow, that felt kind of warm, or I feel my face is smiling lightly. So it's just reconnecting those moments of connection instead of only kind of like honing in on things that feel really hard. And so that's what it feels like. It's like a sweet moment of connection with someone.
And on that note, Deb Dana, love her.
Yeah, I do too.
I have a cute picture with her from last year where I was in a onesie and we got to share a hug. It was very sweet.
Oh, I love that so much. That's such a
I do
cool person to
too.
meet for sure.
She came up to our table and I didn't even recognize her at first until I read her badge, and then I got super excited, and
Hmm.
she's so what's the word I'm looking for? She was very generous in her time with us and like learning about what we do and being like really supportive. And I think when we maneuver, and I say we as in like cuddlist maneuvers in therapy spaces, it feels really good to feel included
Yeah.
and not othered. Like
Mm.
some people some people walk around our table with like an extra like couple feet of distance, like we're gonna come out and give unconsensual hugs or something like that. I'm not really sure what they
Mhm.
think that how we're wired, but that's not how we roll. So, but Deb was very sweet.
Yeah, I like the word generous because I think sometimes it's not always easy to be generous if we're like stuck in
Mm.
certain cycles. And so there's like this practice of being generous. And I feel like the more regular you are, the easier it is to be generous and much harder to be generous when we're surviving.
Also, boundaries.
If you
I
don't have any.
think make being generous so much better, like sustainable, like heartfelt, like the way that people will feel true, genuine generosity and not the opposite of that. the doing it because you're supposed to, or there's pressure, or you want to be a good, you want to be seen as a good person, or
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Wanna be
not your
accepted,
authentic. Yeah, not authentic.
right.
Do it. What did you say, Angela?
Oh, not being rejected, you don't feel accepted, so you wanna provide people please,
Yes.
essentially, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, boundaries are, like, essential, and people have a hard time with them until I think they understand why they're actually truly important, like, what your underneath
Hmm.
needs are. I think it's easier to have kind but firm boundaries, and it really gives you that space to, be more in true alignment with other people versus just doing it because you don't wanna
Yeah, I think it's a hard transition for people that come into whatever kind of work they decide to start, like,
mm,
navigating through. Is like there is a time when it feels like your social circles start to shift
mm,
because we're changing.
yeah,
And I think that's one of those moments, is like the boundaries stuff um will ruffle some feathers in your social circles, can very well start to change. And then it is, I don't know, there's a big transition, I think, that happens a lot of times when people start to do that kind of work, and they're
yeah.
not always ready for it.
For sure, and I think the more you can feel like so I do, like, different boundary work that's, of course, related into the body and how the body feels and what it feels like a yes or a no,
Hmm.
and this whole yarn exercise and seeing, like, how big is your like, there's all these little things that I do with people, and I think when they can start to really see, like, "Oh, I've had no boundaries," or "I have, like, wide open boundaries," I think it's easier to be like, "Okay, I understand why I have to shift them a little bit." And then there's a phase where sometimes you have less social engagement because you're in the process of figuring out what's yours truly versus what's been, vomited on you maybe your whole life or something, and yeah, it's definitely could be, like I said, grief and things that come up during a process of reconnecting with ourselves. And um, I mean, one of the things that Peter Levine's work is also like pendulation. Have you heard of pendulation? Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that's important for people to know because it's not like we dive deep into the biggest trauma and then that would just overwhelm or re-traumatize people. So pendulation is just that you go into like a trigger or a sensation that feels like a trigger. And then also finding 1% in your body or something that feels even 1% more neutral or better and learning that part and then going between the two states. So you're not overwhelming your system. So that's part of the work as well. And it really makes a big ability to really connect to the person instead of being like, okay, we're going to go deep, really hard. And then most people don't operate them. They can't do it. They try to with certain modalities, but like truly it's like that back between the two states and letting your nervous system catch up and reorganize is really important. So,
I mean, that's where some harm can happen if you're working with someone that doesn't have proper training. And
yeah.
Um, I mean, there's some safety built into how our, brains are wired to not kind of let us access things we're not ready for.
Yeah.
But, once we have some hint of what's in the next layer of that onion that we're slowly, slowly peeling, I think it's so important to be gentle. There's the race doesn't work.
It doesn't.
The speed racing through it just
Mhm.
is it's not that it's not that easy. We
Yeah.
should That goes back to the beginning of what does it mean to even heal,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
If you think it's like getting to the end point, the touchdown zone or what have
Mhm.
you, it's just it's not the way it goes.
Yeah, and I think that's like a hopeless journey then, right? Where you think you're always trying to meet some goal or end, and then if you don't actually meet it, because you're always shifting and things become more apparent and all that stuff, but then it just feels like a hopeless journey and stressful
Yeah.
journey, and like as opposed to be like, how can I reconnect? And over time, things will just evolve on their own by reconnecting, and we're
Yeah.
not meant to be at a end goal for sure.
Yeah. What am I doing today that I'm doing differently than I did a year ago?
Yeah.
Right? That's the win. That's the give yourself a high five and or a
Mhm.
hug or whatever your celebration is. But, like, I think it is, like, some meme that says something like being able to find the joy and be okay with joy is really kind of the goal, more
Mhm.
so than never feeling hard things.
For
So,
sure, and it's like, again, reconnecting to recognize that
mhm.
something is different. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's easy to get in this habit of where we're, like, trying to heal and all these things, but we don't slow down and recognize, like, celebrate ourselves and be like, there is a shift here." Then we feel
Yeah.
like we're never actually changing, and then that just continues this pattern of, like, not feeling good enough, and so self-celebration and recognition and clarity is like a big part of the work where it's like, yeah, I still have some triggers and things happening, and I can
Mhm.
see that I'm different in this way, or I can celebrate this part of myself, and it's pretty big.
I had a moment, I think my current, like, wins that I really, really, it's subtle for lack of us, either one of us having subtlety in our vocabulary. Um, but like I'm noticing over the last few years that it used to be that I had to see my reflection in a mirror to realize that I was experiencing joy.
Mm-hmm.
I'd catch myself in the mirror and I go, look at you.
Yeah.
That's a happy Michelle right there. Right. And I think in more recent times, I'm able to feel the joy and not have to see it reflected back to me in a mirror, which to me is like, yes, like
Beautiful.
that's my, I won't even call it a baby step,
Yeah.
but that's like, that's a big win for me. I
I
really
love that.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. Well, where can the folks at home find you, Angela, if they want to work with you? Do you do any remote work? I can't remember.
Yeah, I definitely do remote work, and then I have an office in Escondido, in the central heart of Escondido area. So pretty easy to get to, like close to where Grand Avenue is. A lot of people are more familiar with that than other parts of Escondido. And I mean, my website is Soma Shift, so like the word Soma and then shift.org. And I'm also Soma Shift with Angela on Instagram. My podcast is Everyday Intimacy, so people can connect with me that way. And even Facebook, I have a page, so they'll find me if they search Angela Rivero.
Yeah, it's so good to reconnect with you. And I hope to see you. I'd love to see you at an event, or we'll have to get coffee again soon.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you for having me on and asking me awesome questions.
Yeah, it's good to get intimate with you.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to comment, pose a question, or learn more about the guest often featured on the show, visit us at intimacylabpodcast.com. Please also take a moment to review us on your favorite podcast app. It's one of the best ways to show your support. As for me, you can find out more about my work at meetmichellerenee.com, as well as on most social medias at meetmichellerenee. Let's connect again soon.